My husband splashed wine in my face when I refused to cover the check at the upscale restaurant his mom chose. "Pay the bill or we're done," he warned, while his mother laughed. But what happened next left the whole place stunned. What if the man you married, the man you pledged your life to, wasn't just hiding secrets, but was actively trying to destroy you, piece by piece, right under your nose? And what if his mother was in on it? This isn't just a story about a bad marriage. It's about a betrayal so deep, it nearly cost me everything, including my own sister's life. The air in Le Jardin Mystique, one of Boston's most exclusive restaurants, hung heavy, not just with the scent of truffle oil and old money, but with unspoken resentments. Ethan, my husband of 15 years, sat across from me, his jaw tight, his fingers a white-knuckled grip around his wine glass. Every glint of crystal, every flicker of candlelight on our pristine white tablecloth seemed to spotlight the venomous smirk on his mother Penelope's crimson lips. I took a slow, deep breath, bracing myself. I knew, with chilling certainty, that this moment, this ridiculously lavish, completely unnecessary dinner, was about to define the next chapter of my life, or rather, the end of the current one. "You're embarrassing me," Ethan hissed through clenched teeth, his voice a low growl only I was meant to hear. My heart pounded, but my voice was steady as I replied, "Ethan, I can't pay for this dinner. You know I've been helping my sister, Sarah, with her medical bills. I don't have $3,000 to spare right now." The truth? Sarah's cancer treatments were very real, but they weren't consuming all my resources as I'd led Ethan to believe. For years, I'd been quietly building an escape fund, squirreling away money from my interior design business. Each time Ethan demanded I foot the bill for another extravagant dinner or a designer suit he suddenly needed, I added more to my hidden savings account. "Always excuses," Penelope chimed in, swirling her wine, her voice dripping with the familiar condescension I'd endured for far too long. "Ethan told me you've been quite successful with your little decorating business. Surely you can treat your mother-in-law to one special dinner." I glanced around the restaurant, taking in the other diners in their expensive attire, the soft classical music, the perfectly arranged table settings. Everything about this place screamed old money and privilege, Penelope's natural habitat. She had orchestrated this entire evening, every detail, knowing exactly what she was doing. "No," I said, my voice quiet but rock solid. The change in Ethan was immediate. His carefully constructed facade of sophistication shattered, revealing the raw rage beneath. In one fluid, horrifying motion, he lifted his glass of Cabernet Sauvignon and threw the contents directly into my face. The wine was cold, shockingly cold, against my skin, staining my cream-colored blouse crimson. A collective gasp rippled through the nearby tables. Penelope's sharp, triumphant laugh cut through the shocked silence like a knife. "Pay the bill," Ethan snarled, his eyes blazing, "or this marriage ends right here." Slowly, deliberately, I reached up and wiped the wine from my eyes. My hands were steady, surprisingly steady. 15 years. 15 years of diminishment, of financial manipulation, of walking on eggshells, of feeling invisible. All of it crystallized in that single, shattering moment. I could smell the wine on my skin, feel it dripping onto my collar, hear the whispers of the horrified diners. But instead of the familiar wave of shame, something else surged within me. Clarity. I pushed back my chair. It scraped loudly against the hardwood floor. "You're right about one thing, Ethan," I said, my voice resonating with the power I hadn't known I possessed. "This ends here." I reached into my purse and pulled out my phone. With movements that felt almost cinematic, I opened the camera app and took a photo of my wine-soaked appearance. Then I started recording. "What do you think you're doing?" Ethan sputtered, lunging for my phone. I stepped back, keeping the camera trained on him. "Creating evidence," I replied, my voice stronger than I'd ever heard it. "Would you like to throw something else at me? Perhaps explain to everyone here why you think it's acceptable to assault your wife when she refuses to pay for your mother's extravagant demands." Penelope's smirk finally vanished, replaced by a flicker of fear. "You ungrateful little Mrs. Harrison, Mrs. Harrison," a new voice interrupted. The restaurant manager stood at our table, his expression grave. I'm going to have to ask you and your son to leave immediately. He turned to me, his gaze softening. Ma'am, would you like us to call the police? Ethan shot to his feet so quickly his chair toppled backward. You wouldn't dare. I kept recording. Try me. What happened next changed everything. Not just for me, but for the dozens of witnesses in that restaurant, for the legal system that would soon become involved, and for the women who would later tell me my story gave them courage. But in that moment, all I knew was that I had finally, truly, found my voice. The wine was still dripping down my neck when I made the call that would start my new life. But first, I had one more thing to say to the man who thought he could break me with a glass of wine and 15 years of control. You know what the funny thing is, Ethan? I've already paid for this dinner. I've been paying for everything for 15 years. My dignity, my freedom, my sense of self. But not anymore. Check your joint account tomorrow. I think you'll find it makes for some interesting reading. The look on his face told me he finally understood. I wasn't just ending our marriage. I was taking back my life. Officer Maya Evans had kind eyes that didn't quite match her stern expression. We sat in a quiet corner of the precinct as she reviewed my statement. The wine on my blouse had long since dried to a dull burgundy stain. Mrs. Harrison, she began. Chloe, I corrected her, my voice firm. Just Chloe Porter. I'm going back to my maiden name. She nodded, making a note. Chloe, you mentioned this isn't the first incident. My hands tightened around the paper cup of lukewarm coffee they'd given me. Through the precinct windows, I could see dawn breaking over Boston, painting the sky in shades of pink and gold. I hadn't slept, but I felt more awake than I had in years. The wine throwing? That was new, I admitted. Ethan always preferred less visible methods. Financial control. Emotional manipulation. Isolation. Did you know I haven't seen my best friend, Vivian, in 3 years? He convinced me she was jealous of our marriage, trying to sabotage it. And I believed him. I took a sip of the bitter coffee. But the real masterpiece was how he handled money. Every time my design business succeeded, he found ways to drain my accounts. Emergency investments. Family obligations. Guilt trips about not contributing enough to our future. Meanwhile, his mother orchestrated expensive dinners and vacations that I was expected to fund, all while they both reminded me how lucky I was to be part of their world. Officer Evans's pen moved steadily across her notepad. And last night, you mentioned something about a joint account. A small, grim smile touched my lips. Yes. That was my insurance policy. You see, 2 years ago, I started documenting everything. Every suspicious transaction. Every manipulation. Every incident. I opened a separate account and began moving small amounts of money. Nothing that would trigger suspicion, just enough to build a safety net. I also kept records of how Ethan used our joint account for personal expenses while claiming them as business deductions. The IRS, I imagine, will be very interested in those records. That's why you were recording at the restaurant, she asked. Partly, I said, but mostly because I knew what would happen when Ethan checked the joint account this morning. Last night, while he was busy trying to intimidate me at the restaurant, my lawyer was executing the paperwork I'd prepared months ago. Every questionable transaction, every tax discrepancy, every piece of evidence, it's all been submitted to the relevant authorities. The officer leaned back, studying me intently. You've been planning this for a long time. 2 years, 3 months, and 12 days, I stated, setting down the coffee cup. That's how long it took me to realize that the shame I felt wasn't mine to carry. It belonged to them. My phone buzzed. Another message from Ethan. I'd received dozens since leaving the restaurant, watching them evolve from threats to pleading, then to desperate bargaining. I showed Officer Evans the latest one. Baby, please. We can work this out. I'll get help. Don't destroy everything we've built. What we built, I said quietly, was a prison. It just had very expensive walls. A knock on the door interrupted us. Another officer entered, his expression serious. Miss Porter, we have some visitors who'd like to speak with you. One is Penelope Harrison's lawyer. The other, he hesitated, says she's your sister-in-law. Eleanor Harrison. My heart skipped a beat. Eleanor, or Ellie as she preferred, was Ethan's younger sister, the black sheep of the Harrison family. She'd been cut off financially 5 years ago after refusing to participate in what she called their toxic dynasty. I hadn't spoken to her since. Another relationship Ethan had managed to sever. Ellie's here. My voice wavered for the first time that night. Officer Evans watched me carefully. Would you like to speak with them? I stood up, smoothing my wine-stained blouse. Yes. But first, there's something you need to know about the Harrison family business. Something Ellie and I are probably the only ones brave enough, or stupid enough, to tell you. The officer raised an eyebrow. What's that? The real reason Penelope orchestrated that dinner last night. You see, she recently discovered something I've known for months. Her perfect son, my controlling husband, has been embezzling from his own family's foundation. And I have proof of every transaction. As I followed Officer Evans to the meeting room, I couldn't help but wonder, was I about to find an ally in Ellie, or was this another Harrison family trap? What I did know was that the next few minutes would determine not just my future, but potentially the fate of everyone who had ever been caught in the Harrison family's web of manipulation and deceit. I straightened my shoulders and took a deep breath. Whatever was waiting for me behind that door, I was finally ready to face it. After all, I'd already survived their worst. Or so I thought. But what Ellie was about to tell me would change everything I thought I knew about the past 15 years of my life. Ellie looked exactly as I remembered her. Wild, curly hair, no makeup, and a defiant glint in her eyes that the Harrisons had never managed to extinguish. She sat alone in the interview room. No sign of Penelope's lawyer. When our eyes met, she stood up and did something that made my breath catch. She hugged me. I saw the video, she whispered in my ear. Someone at the restaurant posted it online. You magnificent, brave woman. I pulled back confused. The lawyer. I told him I needed a moment alone with my sister-in-law first, Ellie said, a sharp smile touching her lips. He's probably calling Penelope right now, warning her that the black sheep has returned. We don't have much time. We sat down at the table and Ellie pulled out a worn leather notebook. Remember when I was cut off from the family? Everyone thought it was because I refused to join the family business to be another puppet in Penelope's show. That was part of it, but not the whole truth. She opened the notebook, revealing pages of handwritten notes and what looked like financial records. I found something 5 years ago. Something that made Penelope destroy my reputation and Ethan, well, Ethan chose his side. It's about your design business, Chloe, and about several other small businesses owned by Harrison family spouses over the past 20 years. My throat went dry. What about them? They were never meant to succeed. Ellie's voice was gentle, but her words hit like physical blows. In fact, their failure was the point. Penelope and Ethan, they've been running this scheme for years. They find successful, independent women, bring them into the family through marriage, and then systematically drain their businesses and personal assets. The family reputation and connections lure these women in. And then the manipulation begins. My hands started shaking. The constant expenses, the luxury dinners, the demanded contributions, the guilt about family obligations. It's all orchestrated. They push until the business fails or the woman drains her accounts trying to keep up. Then, once she's financially dependent, they have complete control. I thought about all the other Harrison wives I'd met over the years. Ethan's cousins' wives, family friends. How many of them had been victims of this scheme? How many businesses had been destroyed? But why? I asked, though part of me already knew the terrifying answer. Power. Control. And Ellie hesitated, her gaze unwavering. Money laundering. The Harrison Family Foundation? It's not just about embezzlement. They use these failing businesses to clean money from less legitimate family enterprises. Each bankruptcy, each financial crisis, it's all documented and justified. Perfect cover for moving funds around. I felt sick. That's why Penelope was so insistent about me paying for everything through my business accounts. Exactly. But you did something they didn't expect, didn't you? Ellie's eyes sparkled. You kept records. You built an escape fund. You survived. And now they're scared. My mind raced. That's why Penelope orchestrated that dinner. She found out about my documentation. She found out you were working with an accountant who used to handle some of their legitimate business interests. Daniel Hayes. The name hit me like a thunderbolt. Daniel Hayes. He had approached me 6 months ago, claiming he'd noticed irregularities in how the Harrison family interacted with my business accounts. He'd helped me understand the patterns, gather evidence. He'd been guiding me this whole time. A sharp knock on the door made us both jump. Officer Evans entered, her expression grim. "Chloe, we just got a call from your sister Sarah's nurse. There's been an incident at the hospital." My heart stopped. What kind of incident? Someone tried to access her room claiming to be family. When they were denied entry, they became aggressive. Security intervened, but Ethan, Ellie, and I said simultaneously. "We need to move quickly," Ellie said, standing. "There's more you need to know, but right now we need to get to the hospital. Sarah isn't just your sister, Chloe. She's a witness." 3 years ago, before her cancer diagnosis, she worked as a bookkeeper for one of the Harrison subsidiary companies. The terrifying pieces started falling into place. Sarah's sudden illness. The timing of her cancer diagnosis, right after she'd left the Harrison company. Ethan's insistence on being involved in her medical care. "Oh, God," I whispered, the realization a cold dread in my stomach. "They've been monitoring her all this time, haven't they? Using her illness to control me." Ellie squeezed my hand. "We're going to end this, Chloe. But first, we need to get to Sarah." As we rushed out of the police station, my phone buzzed with a text from an unknown number. The message contained only 4 words, but they made my blood run cold. "You should have paid." What waited for us at the hospital would test everything I thought I knew about love, loyalty, and the true price of freedom. But this time, I wasn't facing it alone. The hospital corridor seemed endless as Ellie and I ran towards Sarah's room, Officer Evans close behind us. The fluorescent lights cast harsh shadows, making everything feel surreal. My wine-stained blouse drew curious glances from hospital staff, but I barely noticed. All I could think about was my sister. Sarah had always been the strong one. Even through her cancer treatments, she'd maintained her quiet dignity, her gentle humor. Now I understood why she'd given me those odd, searching looks whenever Ethan visited her in the hospital. She'd known. She'd known all along. We rounded the corner to her floor and found 2 security guards outside her room. My heart lurched when I saw the disarray in the hallway, a knocked-over cart, scattered medical supplies. But it was the sound coming from Sarah's room that made me break into a sprint. My sister's voice, clear and angry, "I told you to get out." I burst into the room and froze. Sarah was sitting up in her hospital bed, thin but alert, her headscarf slightly askew. Penelope Harrison stood at the foot of her bed, immaculate in designer clothes that probably cost more than Sarah's monthly medical bills. But it was the third person in the room that made my blood run cold. Daniel Hayes, the accountant who'd helped me gather evidence against the Harrisons. He stood beside Penelope, looking nothing like the sympathetic ally who'd guided me through documenting the family's financial abuses. Penelope's voice dripped honey-coated venom. "How good of you to join us. We were just having a lovely chat with your sister about old times, about loyalty, about family secrets." Sarah's eyes met mine, and I saw a lifetime of unspoken words pass between us. "They tried to buy my silence," she said quietly. Again. The first time was 3 years ago, wasn't it? I moved to my sister's side, taking her hand. "It was cold. Right before your diagnosis." Daniel cleared his throat. "Miss Porter, perhaps we could discuss this privately. There's been a misunderstanding about certain documents." "You mean the documents you helped me collect?" I cut him off, my voice sharp. "Tell me, Daniel, was that Penelope's idea? Get close to me. Pretend to help me build a case, all while reporting back to the family? Figure out exactly what evidence I had." "It's more complicated than that," he started. But Ellie's laugh from the doorway cut him off. "Is it, Daniel? Because it seems pretty simple to me." She walked in, Officer Evans beside her. "You helped the family identify threats, then helped neutralize them. How many other wives have you done this to? How many other businesses have you helped destroy?" Penelope's composure cracked, just slightly. "Eleanor, still playing detective, I see. Did you tell Chloe why you really started investigating the family?" About your own failed business ventures. You mean the business you and Ethan sabotaged? Ellie's voice was steady. The one you destroyed because I wouldn't play along with your schemes? Yes, Penelope. I told her everything. Sarah's hand tightened around mine. Chloe, she whispered. The notebook. In my bedside drawer. I reached over and pulled open the drawer. Inside was a worn leather journal, similar to Ellie's, but older, more worn. Penelope took a step forward, but Officer Evans moved to block her path. 3 years ago, Sarah said, her voice gaining strength, I found irregularities in the books, not just in the company I worked for, but patterns across multiple Harrison businesses. I started keeping records. She nodded at the journal. Then I started getting sick. At first, just small things, dizzy spells, fatigue. When I finally got diagnosed. Are you suggesting? Penelope's voice was dangerous. I'm not suggesting anything, Sarah met her gaze steadily. I'm stating facts. I kept copies of everything I found. The original records are safe with my lawyer, sealed with instructions to be opened if anything happens to me. Did you really think I wouldn't protect myself? Protect my sister? Daniel moved toward the door, but Officer Evans stepped into his path. Going somewhere? What happened next seemed to unfold in slow motion. Penelope reached into her designer handbag. Ellie shouted a warning. I threw myself in front of Sarah's bed, but it wasn't a weapon Penelope pulled out. It was a phone. Ethan, she spoke into it, her voice ice cold. It's time for Plan B. The hospital room's lights flickered, then went out completely. In the sudden darkness, I heard Sarah gasp, Ellie curse, and the sound of running footsteps in the hallway. When the emergency lights came on seconds later, Penelope and Daniel were gone. But they'd left something behind. Sarah's medical chart, with a new page added to the front. What was written there would change everything we thought we knew about my sister's illness, the Harrison family's reach, and just how far they'd go to protect their secrets. I picked up the chart with trembling hands. And as I read, I finally understood why Ethan had been so insistent on controlling Sarah's medical care. The truth was far worse than anything we'd imagined. The emergency lights cast an eerie glow over Sarah's medical chart as I read, my hands shaking. Dr. Olivia Reed, no relation to Daniel, thank God, stood beside me, her expression growing darker with each page we reviewed. These treatment protocols, she said, pointing to a series of entries. They're not standard for your type of lymphoma. She flipped through more pages, her frown deepening. In fact, some of these medications shouldn't have been prescribed together at all. The combination would have. She stopped, looking up at Sarah with horror. Would have what? I demanded, though part of me already knew. Would have mimicked and exacerbated symptoms of the cancer, Sarah finished quietly, her voice tinged with bitter resignation. Making me sicker while making it look natural. Ethan insisted on using their family doctor for my prescriptions, said it was all covered by their private insurance. She laughed bitterly. I knew something was wrong when I started getting worse after each new medication, but by then I was too weak to fight it. Ellie was examining the new page Penelope had left. Look at this. It's a liability waiver, backdated 3 years, with Sarah's forged signature. They were covering their tracks, creating a paper trail to protect themselves in case anyone started asking questions. Officer Evans took photos of every page while speaking quietly into her radio. 2 more officers had arrived and were taking statements from the hospital security guards about Penelope and Daniel's exit. Your original doctor, Doctor. Reed said suddenly, before the Harrison family doctor took over. Do you remember their name? Sarah closed her eyes, thinking. Dr. Anya Sharma. She seemed concerned when I told her I was switching doctors. Tried to warn me about something, but Ethan was there and... She looked at me. That was right after you married him, Chloe. I didn't want to cause problems for you. My throat tightened. While I'd been trapped in Ethan's web of financial manipulation, my own sister had been slowly poisoned, and I'd been too blind to see it. The generous offered to cover her medical expenses. His insistence on being involved in her care. The way he'd isolated both of us from our other friends and family. It had all been part of their monstrous plan. We need to find Dr. Sharma, Ellie said firmly. She might have records from before the Harrison doctor took over. something to show Sarah's original condition. Already on it, Officer Evans replied, typing on her phone. And we've got officers looking for Penelope and Daniel. The hospital security cameras caught them leaving in a black SUV heading east. They'll be going to the lake house, I said suddenly. Everyone turned to look at me. The Harrison family lake house in Vermont. It's where they keep their most sensitive documents. Ethan told me once, when he'd had too much to drink, that his father taught him that every family needs a vault. Sarah started to speak, but suddenly began coughing violently. Dr. Reed rushed to check her vital signs while I held my sister's hand, feeling more helpless than ever. Your numbers are dangerously low, Dr. Reed said after examining Sarah. We need to start counteracting these medications immediately. I'm ordering new blood work and calling in a specialist. I have copies, Sarah gasped between coughs. Of everything. Not just the financial records. The original medical reports. She squeezed my hand. In the painting. What painting? Ellie asked. The one I gave Chloe for her wedding. The lighthouse. Sarah's voice was getting weaker. My mind raced back 15 years to my wedding day. Sarah had given us a painting of a lighthouse at dawn, one she'd done herself. Ethan had hated it, called it amateurish, but I'd insisted on keeping it. It had hung in my home office ever since, a reminder of my sister's creative spirit. It's hanging in my office, I said. But Ethan is probably at the house by now. Then we need to get there first, Ellie declared. Those records could prove everything. The financial fraud, the medical manipulation, all of it. Sarah grabbed my arm with surprising strength. Be careful, she whispered. There's something else hidden in that painting. Something I never told anyone about. About the day their father really died. A new text lit up my phone. A message from Ethan with a photo attached. My heart stopped when I opened it. It was a picture of my home office, the wall where Sarah's lighthouse painting hung, or used to hang. The photo showed an empty wall with only a nail remaining. Below it, Ethan had written, "Did you really think I didn't know? Come alone to the lake house. Time to finish this." Dr. Reed's voice seemed to come from far away as she announced Sarah's test results. What she said next would force me to make an impossible choice: pursue Ethan and the evidence that could bring down the Harrison family, or stay with my sister through what might be her final hours. But Sarah made the choice for me. What she said next would change everything and finally reveal the true reason the Harrisons had worked so hard to silence her. Sarah's heart monitor beeped steadily as she gripped my hand. Dr. Reed had just administered a new treatment to counteract the harmful medications, and my sister's determination seemed to give her renewed strength. Their father, Victor Harrison, Sarah's voice was quiet but clear, didn't die of a heart attack like everyone thinks. I was there that day at the family company. I was working late, going through some files Victor had specifically requested I audit. Ellie moved closer, her face pale. I always thought there was something odd about Dad's death. He found something, Sarah continued, her gaze locked on mine. Something big. He called me into his office that evening, showed me documents about offshore accounts, shell companies. Said he had evidence that Penelope and Ethan were embezzling from the family foundation, using it to launder money from other enterprises. He was going to turn them in. My stomach churned. What happened? Penelope happened. She came in during our conversation. I ducked into the adjacent file room when I heard her voice. Victor and I had already learned to be cautious. Through the door's window, I saw. Sarah paused, taking a shaky breath. I saw her put something in his coffee. He collapsed minutes later. You witnessed our mother murder our father. Ellie's voice cracked, raw with disbelief. I took photos with my phone. Got videos of her calmly calling security, playing the grieving wife. I also managed to grab some of the documents Victor had shown me. That's what's hidden in the painting, Chloe. Not just company records, but evidence of Victor's murder. Officer Evans, who had been quietly taking notes, stepped forward. Why didn't you come forward then? Penelope saw me. Not that day, but a week later. Made it very clear what would happen to my sister if I ever spoke up. Then, a few months later, Chloe met Ethan. Sarah looked at me apologetically. I tried to warn you, but you were so happy. By the time I realized what they were doing to you, they had already started poisoning me, making sure I stayed quiet, using my illness to control both of us. Dr. Reed checked Sarah's latest test results. The new treatment is working, but slowly. We need to keep her under close observation for at least 24 hours. My phone buzzed again. Another message from Ethan. 1 hour. Come alone or the painting burns along with everything else you care about. Go, Sarah said firmly, pushing my hand. I've got Dr. Reed and the police here. Ellie can stay with me. You need to end this. It's not safe, Officer Evans warned. We can send a team to the lake house. No, I said, an idea forming, cold and precise in my mind. Ethan expects me to come alone, and that's exactly what I'll do. But first, I need to make a call. I stepped into the hallway and dialed a number I hadn't used in 3 years. It rang twice before a familiar voice answered. Chloe? Is it really you? Vivian. I fought back tears at hearing my best friend's voice. Remember when you told me there was something off about Ethan? About the whole Harrison family? I need your help. You still work for the FBI's Financial Crimes Division, right? 20 minutes later, I was in my car, driving toward the lake house. In my rearview mirror, I could see unmarked vehicles following at a discreet distance, Vivian's team coordinating with local law enforcement. My hands were steady on the wheel as I rehearsed the plan in my head. What Ethan didn't know was that while he'd been focused on Sarah's painting, he'd missed something far more important. Something I discovered the night before when I'd finally gathered the courage to open the locked drawer in Penelope's antique desk at their main house. The contents of that drawer explained everything, why they'd chosen me, why they'd targeted other successful women over the years, and most importantly, where all the money had really gone. The lake house came into view, its imposing silhouette dark against the setting sun. Ethan's car was parked out front, along with Penelope's SUV. Through the large windows, I could see movement inside. They were waiting for me. I parked and took a deep breath, checking my phone one last time. A message from Ellie. Sarah is stabilizing. We found Dr. Sharma. She's on her way to the hospital with her original records. Go get them, sis. As I walked toward the house, I felt strangely calm. Ethan thought he was drawing me into a trap, but he'd forgotten something crucial about me. Something that Penelope, in all her careful planning, had overlooked. Before I was Ethan's wife, before I was a victim of their schemes, I was Sarah Porter's sister. And she hadn't been the only one keeping secrets all these years. I raised my hand to knock, the setting sun casting my shadow long across the porch. What waited for me inside would either be my undoing or my redemption. But first, I had a story to tell Ethan about another hidden painting, one that Penelope never knew existed, but would bring her entire empire crashing down. The lake house door opened before I could even knock. Ethan stood there, his usual polished appearance slightly disheveled, his eyes wild. The familiar scent of expensive scotch wafted from him, his father's brand. How fitting. Where is it? I asked calmly, stepping inside. Your sister's amateur painting? He gestured to the living room, where the lighthouse piece leaned against the stone fireplace. Penelope sat in her favorite armchair, looking like she was presiding over a board meeting rather than a hostage situation. Daniel Hayes paced near the windows, checking his phone nervously. Amateur. I allowed myself a small smile. That's what you always said. Never even bothered to look closely at it, did you? Too focused on belittling anything that came from my family. Enough games, Penelope snapped, her voice like ice. We know Sarah hid documents inside it. Hand over any copies you've made, and we can discuss a mutually beneficial resolution. I walked over to the painting, studying it in the fading light. You know what I always loved about Sarah's art? Her attention to detail. The way she layered things. Like this lighthouse. Did you ever notice it's not just one building? There's another structure reflected in the water, but it's slightly different. Almost like what? Ethan demanded, his patience thin. Like she painted 2 different versions of the truth, I said, turning to face them. The one above the water that everyone sees, and the one below, hidden but still there. Kind of like your family, isn't it? Penelope stood, her patience visibly thinning. If you think Victor saw it, too, didn't he? I cut her off. The hidden truth. That's why you killed him. The room went deadly silent. Daniel stopped pacing. Sarah told you? Penelope's voice was dangerously low. Well, that was a mistake she won't live to regret. Did you really think we'd let her recover? Those new treatments she's receiving? Let's just say we have friends in many places. My heart clenched, but I kept my expression neutral. Actually, she didn't have to tell me anything. I already knew. You see, Victor Harrison wasn't just consulting with Sarah that day. He was building a case, gathering allies. And one of those allies was my father. Ethan took a step forward, bewildered. What are you talking about? Your father died in a car accident 12 years ago. Did he? I pulled out my phone and opened a photo. This was taken the day before Victor died. Security footage from a cafe in Burlington. I held it up, showing Victor Harrison sitting with my father, documents spread between them. Dad was a forensic accountant. He'd been tracking your family's activities for years. When he got too close, I let the sentence hang. Penelope's composure cracked, just slightly. You're bluffing. Am I? Where do you think I learned to keep such detailed records, to build evidence so carefully? Dad taught me everything. Before you had him killed. And I've been planning this moment since the day Ethan first asked me out. I turned to my husband, whose face was now utterly pale. Did you really think it was coincidence that you met me at that charity gala? That I just happened to be the successful businesswoman you were looking for? You knew all this time? Ethan stammered. I knew what you were. What your family did to successful women. How you trapped them, drained them, destroyed them. Sarah wasn't just helping me gather evidence these past few years. She was helping me finish Dad's work. I walked to Penelope's chair and reached behind it, feeling for the hidden latch Dad had told me about years ago, the one Victor had shown him. A small panel in the wall clicked open. Victor didn't just keep evidence at the office, I said quietly. He kept his most damaging files right here, in his wife's favorite room, behind her favorite chair, watching her every day, waiting for the right moment. When he died, Dad took over. When they killed Dad, I stepped in. And now, suddenly, lights flooded the house from outside. Sirens wailed. Vivian's voice came through a megaphone. FBI. The house is surrounded. Daniel bolted for the door but was met by agents rushing in. Ethan lunged for the painting, but I was faster. I grabbed it and swung it hard, connecting with his jaw. He sprawled backward, stunned more by the betrayal than the blow. Penelope remained seated, her face a mask of cold fury. You won't win, she said softly, her eyes glinting. You have no idea how far our influence reaches. I pulled out a final photo from my pocket and placed it in her lap. Her hands trembled as she recognized it. Victor and my father. But there was a third person in the photo, a young woman with wild, curly hair. Ellie, Penelope whispered, her voice barely audible. Your own daughter? I nodded. She didn't just start investigating 5 years ago. She's been part of this since the beginning. Everything she did, getting cut off from the family, starting her own business, letting you destroy it, it was all to make you feel safe, to keep you from looking too closely at her real work. As the FBI agents moved in with handcuffs, I picked up Sarah's painting. By the way, there aren't any documents hidden in here. Sarah's art was always just art. Beautiful, honest, real. Everything your family couldn't understand or control. But what happened next would prove that even I hadn't uncovered all the Harrison family secrets. Penelope's last words to me before they took her away would lead to one final revelation. One that would change not just my life, but the lives of every woman the Harrisons had ever victimized. As the FBI agents led Penelope toward the door, she stopped and turned to me. Her perfectly manicured hands were cuffed in front of her, but she maintained her regal posture. For a moment, I saw something in her eyes I'd never seen before, a flicker of respect. You know, she said quietly, her voice almost gentle. You remind me of someone. A woman I used to be before I made my choice. What choice was that? I asked, though part of me didn't want to know. The choice to become the predator instead of the prey. Penelope's smile was bitter. 30 years ago, I was you. A successful interior designer with my own business. Then I met Victor Harrison's father, Robert. He did to me exactly what we've done to others. Destroyed my business. Isolated me. Trapped me. Ethan, being handcuffed nearby, jerked his head up. Mother. But Penelope continued, ignoring her son. I learned. I watched. And when Robert died, not accidentally, I assure you, I decided to turn his weapon against others. Victor never knew. He thought he'd married a society woman, never realizing I was recreating his father's scheme, making it more sophisticated, more profitable. The revelation hit me like a physical blow. You were the first victim. I was the last victim, she corrected. And the first perpetrator. Every woman we targeted, every business we destroyed, I chose them because they were like me. Strong. Independent. Capable. I couldn't stand to see them succeed where I had failed. Vivian stepped forward, her FBI badge gleaming. Mrs. Harrison, I suggest you save your confessions for your formal statement. But Penelope wasn't finished. Check the foundations, she said, her eyes locked on mine. Not the family foundation. The actual foundations. The lake house. The main house. All the properties. Robert taught Victor about keeping vaults, yes. But I taught Victor about keeping secrets. About building them into the very walls of our empire. A young FBI agent approached with a tablet. Ma'am, we're finding something unusual in the thermal scans of the buildings. The basement here shows multiple hidden rooms. Hidden rooms. Ethan looked bewildered, frantic. That's impossible. I know every inch of these houses. Do you? Penelope laughed softly, a chilling sound. You never questioned why we always used the same construction company for every renovation? Why certain areas were off limits during work? Victor thought he was so clever with his evidence, never realizing I had my own collection growing right under his feet. 30 years of secrets, buried in concrete and steel. I thought about all the Harrison properties I'd helped redesign over the years. Always working around structural limitations that Penelope had insisted couldn't be changed. What's in those rooms? Everything, she said simply. Every scheme. Every victim. Every crime. Not just ours, but going back to Robert's time. I kept it all. Insurance, I told myself. She glanced at Ethan, and something like regret, fleeting and fragile, crossed her face. But really? I think I was waiting. Waiting for what? Vivian asked. For someone strong enough to end it, Penelope straightened her shoulders. To do what I couldn't. In my study at the main house, behind the Monet, there's a safe. The combination is the date Robert died. Inside, you'll find a letter, written the day I realized I was pregnant with Ethan. Read it. You'll understand why it had to be you, Chloe. As they led Penelope away, I turned to Vivian. We need to get to that safe before anyone else does. The drive to the main Harrison house was a blur. The FBI team worked quickly, locating and opening the safe. Inside was a single envelope, yellowed with age, addressed simply, to the one who ends it. What I read in that letter would reshape everything I thought I knew about Penelope, about the cycle of abuse and power, and about the true cost of revenge. But more importantly, it would show me the way forward. Not just for me, but for every woman the Harrisons had ever hurt. Because Penelope hadn't just been keeping evidence of crimes. She'd been keeping something far more valuable, the means to make everything right. The letter trembled in my hands as I read it in Penelope's study, Vivian and Ellie beside me. The paper was fragile with age, but the words were clear, written in a shakier version of Penelope's precise handwriting. To the woman who finally stops me, if you're reading this, you've done what I couldn't. You've chosen justice over power, healing over revenge. I write this sitting in my newly renovated study, feeling my unborn son move inside me, wondering what kind of mother I'll become, what kind of monster I already am. In the hidden rooms beneath every Harrison property, you'll find more than evidence. You'll find bank accounts, property deeds, and trust funds. A fortune built on broken dreams. Robert Harrison didn't just destroy businesses. He stole them, piece by piece, rebuilding his empire with the fragments of women's lives. I followed his template, perfected it, and in doing so, became something worse than my abuser. But I did something else too. Something neither Robert nor Victor ever discovered. For every business we destroyed, every woman we broke, I kept a separate set of records. Real records showing the true value of what was stolen. And I did more than document. I duplicated every property deed, every account, every asset. I created shadow versions, all legally binding, all hidden away. With this letter, you'll find a key to a safety deposit box at First National Bank. Inside is everything you need to transfer it all back. Not just to return what was stolen, but to restore what was lost, with 30 years of interest. I tell myself I kept these records as insurance. But the truth is simpler and harder to face. I kept them because some part of me, the part that died the day I chose power over justice, wanted someone to find them. Wanted someone to be stronger than I was. You're reading this because you were that someone. Because you did what I couldn't. You fought back. You didn't let the abuse turn you into an abuser. You kept your humanity. Use it wisely. Use it better than I did. Penelope Harrison, April 15, 1990. 3 months later, I stood in the newly renovated Harrison Foundation building. Now it was the Eyes Open Foundation for Women's Economic Justice. The hidden rooms had yielded exactly what Penelope promised, the means to restore everything the Harrison family had stolen with interest. But they'd revealed something else, too. Something Penelope hadn't mentioned in her letter. Ready? Ellie asked, adjusting the sign above the building's entrance. I nodded, watching as women began arriving for the foundation's opening day. Many were familiar faces, Harrison victims, now survivors, each carrying their own stories of loss and resilience. But they weren't here just to receive restitution. They were here to help guide it, to ensure that what happened to them never happened to anyone else. Sarah, now in remission thanks to proper treatment, stood beside me. The proper medical care, funded by the recovered assets, had reversed much of the damage done by the Harrisons' deliberate poisoning. Did you ever think, when you married Ethan, that it would end like this? She mused. No, I admitted, watching as Vivian led a workshop on recognizing financial abuse. But I never thought Penelope would help us fix it, either. That had been the final surprise in the hidden rooms, journals, dozens of them, chronicling Penelope's struggle with what she'd become. The last entry, written the night before the restaurant confrontation, read simply, I see myself in Chloe, but I see who I could have been, who I should have been. Perhaps it's not too late for one last choice. Ethan and Penelope both took plea deals, providing evidence that helped prosecute others involved in their schemes. Daniel Hayes turned state's witness. The Harrison empire crumbled, but something better rose from its ashes. Inside my office, once Penelope's study, Sarah's lighthouse painting hung proudly. I understood now why she'd painted that double image. The truth above, reflecting a deeper truth below, just like Penelope's final act had reflected her original self. The woman she'd been before fear and rage twisted her into something else. My phone buzzed. A text from Ellie, another. One just came forward. A victim from Robert's time. She's ready to tell her story. I looked out my window at the women gathering below, each carrying their own light out of darkness. Penelope's final gift hadn't just been the means to restore what was stolen. It had been the chance to break a cycle of abuse that had spanned generations. Coming, I texted back. Before leaving my office, I glanced one last time at the lighthouse painting. The sun in Sarah's image was both rising and setting, depending on how you looked at it. An ending and a beginning, all at once. Just like that night in the restaurant when a glass of wine meant to shame me had instead set me free. This whole journey started with a splash of wine and ended with a wave of justice. It taught me that even in the darkest corners, there's always a hidden light, and sometimes, the victim becomes the one who shines the brightest. What do you think about Penelope's final confession? Was she a villain or a victim who became her own abuser? Let me know your thoughts in the comments below. I'm truly curious to hear your perspectives. That final question, about Penelope being a villain or a victim, it still echoes in my mind sometimes. It's funny how easily we categorize people, especially in stories like mine. Good, bad, hero, villain. But life and people are so much more complicated, aren't they? That letter, found behind the Monet in her study, changed everything I thought I knew about the woman who had tormented me for years. It forced me to see the origins of her cruelty, the twisted logic of her survival. It didn't excuse her actions, not by a long shot, but it peeled back a layer, revealing a profound and tragic understanding. 3 months later, standing in what was once the grand, imposing facade of the Harrison Family Foundation building, now emblazoned with a new, hopeful name, the Eyes Open Foundation for Women's Economic Justice, I was still processing it all. The legal battles had been brutal, a tangled web of shell corporations, offshore accounts, and fraudulent documents that took an army of forensic accountants and legal minds, including Vivian's incredible FBI team, to untangle. Ethan and Daniel Hayes took plea deals, their testimonies crucial in unmasking an even wider network of corruption that extended beyond the immediate Harrison family. Their cooperation, born of desperation rather than remorse, became another grim thread in the tapestry of Penelope's meticulously documented schemes. The sheer scale of what Penelope had hidden, what she had facilitated and documented, was staggering. Those hidden rooms she mentioned weren't just in the lake house. They were in almost every Harrison-owned property, meticulously engineered vaults containing not just financial records, but diaries, letters, even old newspaper clippings detailing forgotten bankruptcies and suicides of women from generations past. Each one a silent testament to the insidious cycle Robert Harrison had begun and Penelope had perfected. It was like she had curated a museum of their victims, a macabre archive of suffering and stolen lives. Reading through them, sometimes late at night in the quiet solitude of my new office, her old study, the irony was not lost on me. I'd feel a chilling kinship with that younger Penelope. I saw her strength, her drive, her independence, slowly corrode under the weight of Robert's financial tyranny, then morph into the very weapon she turned against others. It was a dark, cautionary tale staring me in the face, a stark reminder of what could happen if you let your wounds define you in destructive ways. The Foundation's opening day was a whirlwind of emotions. Sunlight streamed through the tall arched windows, illuminating the hopeful faces of women who had gathered, many of them familiar. There were the wives of Ethan's cousins, women I'd dismissed as vapid socialites, now sharing their stories of financial dependency and emotional abuse. There were faces I didn't recognize, women from Robert Harrison's era, their eyes holding a wisdom born of decades of silent suffering, now finally finding a voice. It was overwhelming, humbling, and utterly exhilarating. Ellie, my fierce and loyal sister-in-law, stood beside me, adjusting the gleaming brass sign above the entrance. Her wild, curly hair framed a face that radiated a new kind of peace, a defiant joy. She had become the Foundation's head of outreach, her personal history and empathy making her a magnet for women who felt unheard. She knew the Harrison playbook inside out, could spot the manipulation in a casual remark, the insidious control in an overly generous gift. "Can you believe this, Chloe?" she whispered, her voice thick with emotion as she gestured to the bustling hall. "This is what happens when silence is broken." Sarah, walking slowly but steadily, joined us, a radiant smile on her face. Her proper medical treatment, fully funded by the recovered assets, had indeed reversed much of the damage. She looked healthier, stronger, her spirit undimmed. She'd become an invaluable asset to the Foundation, working on survivor support programs, her gentle humor and quiet dignity a beacon for others. Her personal story, the deliberate poisoning, was a stark reminder of the lengths the Harrisons would go to maintain their control, and a powerful call to action for every woman who walked through our doors. One of our first major cases, one that truly brought home the generational impact of the Harrison schemes, was that of Mrs. Eleanor Vance. A petite woman in her late 70s with silver hair and eyes that held a haunted glint. She was one of Robert Harrison's earliest victims, her thriving millinery business, inherited from her mother, systematically dismantled in the 1960s. Penelope's journals contained a devastating entry about Mrs. Vance. Robert had used her business to launder funds during a period of intense scrutiny from the IRS. When the net tightened, he had deliberately sabotaged her company's books, framing her for tax fraud, forcing her into bankruptcy, and making her financially dependent on him before casting her aside. "I lost everything," Mrs. Vance told us, her voice raspy with years of unspoken pain. "My business, my home, my reputation. My husband, he never looked at me the same." He thought I was incompetent, a failure. He died believing that lie. She clutched a faded photograph of her husband. I tried to tell people, but Robert Harrison was too powerful, too well-respected. Ellie, with her deep understanding of the family's tactics, helped Mrs. Vance articulate the subtle manipulations, the gradual erosion of control. Sarah worked with her on emotional support, helping her navigate the complex feelings of anger, grief, and long-buried shame. Vivian and her team, now working closely with us, used Penelope's records to piece together an airtight case. The shadow ledgers, the duplicated deeds, the cryptic notes in Penelope's journals, it all painted a picture that was undeniable. It wasn't easy. The remaining Harrison loyalists, those who had benefited from the family's illicit wealth, tried to fight us every step of the way. They launched smear campaigns, spread rumors, tried to intimidate our staff and the women we were helping. It was a constant battle, a reminder that dismantling an empire built on generations of abuse wasn't just about legal victories. It was about changing a deeply entrenched mindset, exposing a toxic culture that had thrived in the shadows. There was a particularly ugly incident involving a disgruntled former Harrison employee, a man who had been complicit in some of Ethan's earlier financial schemes. He started harassing some of the Foundation's younger employees, making veiled threats, attempting to discredit our work. It stirred up old fears in me, the feeling of being hunted, that lingering sense of unease that had shadowed my marriage. But this time, I wasn't alone. Ellie, Sarah, Vivian, and the entire team rallied. We documented every instance, filed restraining orders, and worked with law enforcement. We fought back, not with anger, but with precision and unwavering resolve. It solidified a core principle of the Foundation. We wouldn't just reclaim what was lost, we would protect those who dared to stand up. As I delved deeper into Penelope's hidden rooms, I found things that chilled me to the bone, but also hardened my resolve. Beyond the financial ledgers, there were microfiches of old news articles linking seemingly disparate accidents and misfortunes to the Harrison family's expansion. There were encrypted hard drives filled with surveillance footage, not just of victims, but of family members, revealing how deeply paranoia had infected their lives. I even found a small, intricately carved wooden box containing baby booties and a lock of blonde hair, a memento from Penelope's first child, a daughter she never spoke of, who died tragically young, an event that, in her journal, she obliquely linked to Robert's neglect. It was a powerful, heartbreaking glimpse into the woman she had once been, a mother mourning, a woman slowly being consumed by the very darkness she would later wield. This wasn't just about money. It was about absolute power, psychological warfare, and the systematic destruction of human spirit. One afternoon, I stumbled upon a thick, leather-bound book hidden behind a false panel in the study's built-in bookshelf. It wasn't a ledger, but a personal journal, distinct from the others Penelope had kept. This one was older, its pages filled with elegant, sloping script that dated back to before her marriage to Robert. It chronicled her vibrant early life as a budding interior designer, her dreams, her first love, not Robert, her independent spirit. It was a Penelope I barely recognized, a woman overflowing with creativity and ambition, not unlike myself. The entries grew darker after she met Robert, detailing the subtle erosion of her confidence, the gaslighting, the financial strangulation disguised as managing her assets. There was an entry, dated just days after her wedding, where she wrote, "I feel a golden cage closing around me. The bars are gilded, the food is exquisite, but the air is growing thin. He smiles, and I feel a chill. He holds me, and I feel nothing but the weight of his expectations. My spirit, once so bright, dims with each passing day." I told him of my passion for art, for design, and he patted my head, saying, "My dear, your greatest creation will be the Harrison heir." I feel a silent scream trapped within me. This personal journal became a turning point for me. It transformed Penelope from a purely monstrous figure into a deeply flawed, tragically broken human being. It reinforced the idea that abuse isn't just about the abuser, it's about the devastating impact it has, warping even the most promising spirits. It also instilled in me a fierce determination that the Eyes Open Foundation would not just focus on restitution, but on restoration, of dignity, of dreams, of self. My own healing journey was a long and winding road. I started seeing a therapist, someone Vivian recommended, who specialized in financial trauma and domestic abuse. It wasn't easy to unpack 15 years of subtle manipulation, to acknowledge the insidious ways Ethan and Penelope had chipped away at my self-worth. There were days when I'd feel a wave of shame wash over me, a feeling of how could I have been so blind? But my therapist helped me understand that shame wasn't mine to carry. It belonged to the perpetrators, the architects of that emotional prison. She helped me recognize the patterns, not just in my own life, but in the lives of countless other strong, independent women who had been targeted. It wasn't about weakness, it was about a sophisticated, calculated system of exploitation. Rebuilding my relationship with Sarah was paramount. We spent hours talking, reliving the past, piecing together fragments of memory that now made chilling sense. Her whispered warnings, my dismissal of them fueled by Ethan's gaslighting. Her quiet suffering, my preoccupation with my own survival. We cried a lot, held each other, and slowly, painstakingly, mended the unspoken wounds between us. Sarah's strength, her resilience in the face of such profound betrayal and physical abuse, became my daily inspiration. She wasn't just a survivor, she was a warrior, her quiet dignity a testament to the human spirit's ability to endure and overcome. Ellie, too, was grappling with her own complex grief and anger. She was rebuilding her own shattered life, her interior design business, which Penelope and Ethan had deliberately sabotaged, now thriving with the support of the foundation. She channeled her rage into fierce advocacy, her wit and sharp intellect making her an indomitable force. We found a shared purpose in building the foundation, turning our individual pain into a collective power. Our bond, forged in the crucible of Harrison family secrets, was unbreakable. My own interior design business had undergone a profound transformation. I still took on clients, but my focus had shifted. I specialized in creating therapeutic, empowering spaces, often for women who were rebuilding their lives after trauma. My own home, once the scene of my confinement, became a sanctuary filled with light, art, and the tangible presence of my renewed freedom. I found immense satisfaction in helping women reclaim their physical spaces, understanding deeply that a home should be a haven, not a cage. The Eyes Open Foundation grew rapidly, a beacon of hope for women nationwide. We didn't just provide legal aid and financial restitution, we offered holistic support, therapy, career counseling, business mentorship, and a powerful community of survivors. We started a national database, carefully anonymized, of perpetrators and their modus operandi, a tool to identify and expose similar schemes before they could take root. One significant policy change we championed was a revision to marital property laws, making it harder for abusive spouses to financially drain their partners through hidden assets and fraudulent business practices. We testified before Congress, shared the heartbreaking stories of women like Eleanor Vance, and presented the overwhelming evidence Penelope had meticulously collected. It was a huge, hard-won victory, a systemic change that would protect countless women in the future. Months turned into a year, then two. The lake house, once a symbol of Harrison control, was repurposed into a retreat center for survivors, a place of healing and rejuvenation. The main Harrison house, stripped of its opulent, oppressive decor, became the foundation's bustling headquarters. One quiet evening, after a particularly long day at the foundation, I found myself back in my office, gazing at Sarah's lighthouse painting. The sun, as she depicted it, was forever caught between rising and setting, a constant flux of endings and beginnings. It resonated deeply with Penelope's final act, her desperate, twisted, yet ultimately profound choice. Her legacy remained complex. She had inflicted unimaginable pain, but she had also, in her own dark way, provided the tools for its undoing. Her journals, particularly that fragile, personal one, revealed a woman trapped in a cycle she couldn't escape, but who, at the very end, offered a blueprint for freedom. I picked up my phone. A text from Ellie. Just got off the phone with Dr. Anya Sharma. Her original records confirmed Sarah's initial diagnosis and treatment plan were deliberately undermined. We have everything we need to push for criminal charges against the Harrison family doctor. Justice is coming for him too. I smiled. The cycle was breaking, piece by agonizing piece. The system that had allowed the Harrisons to thrive in darkness was being challenged, illuminated, and dismantled. It all started with a glass of wine and 15 years of silent suffering. It began with betrayal, but it unfolded into a profound testament to resilience, sisterhood, and the enduring power of truth. The journey was harrowing, marked by fear, anger, and heartbreak. But in facing the darkness, I found my own light. Not just to guide me home, but to help others find their way too. And that, I realized, was the truest form of freedom. It wasn't just about escaping a prison. It was about building a sanctuary for others, brick by painful brick, out of the ashes of what was stolen. And in that, I found a purpose more profound than I could have ever imagined. This story, my story, is far from over. The fight for justice and economic equality for women is a long one, but we are ready. The Eyes Open Foundation stands strong, a testament to the strength found in unity, a beacon that says, "We see you. We hear you. And you are not alone." What lessons from my journey resonate most with you? Have you ever had to reclaim your own narrative or fight for a truth others didn't want to hear? Share your thoughts below. Every story shared, every voice raised, helps to shed light in the darkest corners.